listener production.
Hey, Chris Spear with you. Happy Friday and welcome to The Briefing. One of the world's most famous families has been making headlines all week after Brooklyn Beckham publicly cut ties with his parents, David and Victoria. And while it's got the world talking and generating wild pictures of Posh Spice on the dance floor, what can this whole saga tell us about broader issues surrounding things like family breakups, boy-mum culture, and even performative parenting?
Proud parenting is really about sharing joy and milestones in ways that, I guess, respect a child's dignity and their privacy, whereas performative parenting is really about the parent's image.
That's coming up in the second half of this episode. First, though, let's get into the headlines with Sasha Barber-Gatt. It's Friday, the 23rd of January.
Hi, Chris. The Prime Minister has apologised to the Jewish community for not keeping them safe in a speech at last night's service for the Bondi terror victims.
Tragically, we are gathered here tonight because on the 14th of December, everything changed. And for that, I am sorry. We cherish the promise of Australia that this country is a safe harbour. But sadly, that promise was broken.
1,500 people were at the invite-only event at Sydney's Opera House last night, which started with a minute's silence at 7:01 p.m.
Among the mourners were the families of the 15 people killed, as well as first responders, survivors and Jewish community leaders, along with Ahmed El-Ahmed, who went viral for his heroism in tackling one of the alleged shooters during the attack. Anthony Albanese saying this to the mourning families of those lost.
I am deeply and profoundly sorry that we could not protect your loved ones from this evil. We gather here tonight, drawn together in one Australian icon, to mourn the devastation inflicted at another. Tonight we stand in solidarity with Jewish Australians and we affirm and we reaffirm the shared values of unity, compassion and resilience that define our great nation of Australia.
The theme for the night was Light Will Win, with candles representing the 15 victims lit on stage by their loved ones as monuments in Sydney and Canberra were lit up in bright lights. The event was held on the country's official day of mourning, which was chosen to coincide with Shloshim, the 1 month mark after the death and burial of a loved one in Jewish tradition.
Australians were asked to take part in another Jewish tradition as part of the day of mourning called mitzvah, which involves acts of kindness and compassion, so giving to charity or greeting strangers with a smile. And look, last night marked an important moment in the healing journey for not only the Jewish community but also the countries as we try to come to terms with the tragedy and also what that has stirred up in its wake. The Royal Commission, of course, into the Bondi attack is already underway. An interim report is due in April before the full findings are handed down on December 14 this year to mark the 1-year anniversary.
A New South Wales country town remains in lockdown this morning, with police continuing to search for a gunman who shot and killed 3 people and injured a 4th before fleeing. Locals in Lake Cargellico in the state's central west have been told to stay indoors after bullets were fired into a car at around 4:20 p.m. yesterday, killing a man and a woman believed to be the gunman's former partner.
Police say they've identified the gunman, who a short time later fired more rounds in a nearby street, killing another woman and leaving a man in critical condition before slipping away in a car. Authorities have not yet publicly identified the attacker or the victims, but they do say they were all local to the area and that a large search is underway, calling in extra personnel, tactical police and air crews from surrounding areas. Now, this is believed to be a domestic violence-related incident and it happened about 500 k's from Sydney. So it's quite a small country town, no more than 1,500 people there. And the New South Wales Police Assistant Commissioner talked about just how devastating and how confronting that scene would have been for first responders because they are locals themselves and there's a good chance that they would have known or known of who was involved and who the victims were. So, yeah, quite a shocking incident there, Chris.
Victorians are being told to brace for another heat wave where temps are forecast to reach as high as 48 degrees next week. The Bureau of Meteorology is warning hot and dry conditions will start from tomorrow with a top of 40 degrees in Melbourne and getting up to 42 on Tuesday. But it's the northern parts of the state that are on the highest alert, with Mildura in the northwest set to swelter through at least 6 days of 40-plus temps starting from Saturday. Those conditions are set to peak on Tuesday with a maximum of 48 degrees.
Yeah, looking at that forecast, Chris, it was just a whole week of 40, 43, 45, 48. Like, it's absolutely insane temperatures. And of course, this all comes after the intense heat wave less than 2 weeks ago, which sparked devastating bushfires right across Victoria, killing one person, destroying hundreds of homes and thousands of head of livestock. While new analysis has found the multi-day event was made 5 times more likely by climate change. So this international science group called World Weather Attribution came to the conclusion after examining the max temps seen in South Australia, Victoria, New South Wales and Tassie over the 3 days between January 7 and 9. And they found that before man-made climate change, heat waves like what we saw at the start of the year did happen, but with much less frequency, on average 4 times a century. So, yeah, it just goes to show just, the impacts of climate change and what it's actually doing to our weather. This analysis also found that on the current path of global warming that we're on, southeastern Australia can expect to see a heat wave like this once every 2 years.
Changing pace and to tennis now, where Madison Inglis has become the last Aussie woman standing in the singles, advancing to round 3 of the AO after an insane win against German world number 48, Laura Sigemond.
From the brink of defeat, Madison Inglis shows the heart of a lion.
I actually can't believe it. To be back in the 3rd round of Australian Open, far out. I'm lost for words right now.
That audio thanks to 9, and the 28-year-old was on court for just under 3.5 hours. She went to tiebreak, found herself with 4 match points, and it was a very, very super tense game. But well done to Madison.
Yeah, go Maddie. We are all backing you as you advance through the AO. Look, elsewhere we had James Duckworth taking on 2-time defending champ Yannick Sinner. He did lose in straight sets. Also out are Rinky Hijikata, Dane Sweeney, Taylor Preston, and your mates, Chris, the Special Ks, Nick Kyrgios and Thanasi Kokkinakis.
I'm so sad about that. I'm so sad. I did watch the first half, but I did have to go to bed. And look, in their defence, Sasha Barbagat, these boys are injured. They've been through it. Thanasi's got a terrible shoulder injury. They had to take some time during the game for him to be tended to by a physio or whatever. And, Nick had tape on his knee, so they didn't put their best foot forward, is what I'm trying to say here.
Well, what I like is they actually lost to fellow Aussies,
yes.
Mark Polmans and Jason Kubler. So maybe they're going to be the new special doubles pairing at the Oz Open.
They just have to come up with a much more creative name. Now, look, in action today, day 6, we have world number 1 Arina Sabalenka, Daniil Medvedev, Carlos Alcaraz, Coco Gauff, Alexander Zverev, and, of course, our Aussie Alex de Minaur. Kyrgios is also scheduled to play mixed doubles tonight with Canadian Leylah Fernandez. Whether or not he shows up, who knows, but I'll be flicking on the telly to, have a little look at that.
And 2 Aussies have scored Oscars nominations, with the full list dropping overnight. Rose Byrne, fresh off winning the Golden Globe for Best Actress in If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, has received the nod for the same category, while Jacob Elordi is up for Best Supporting Actor for his role in Frankenstein.
Also, the title of that movie that she's in is just wild. If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You.
I'm going to watch it just based on the name.
Me too. And look, history was made meantime by your pick, actually, for Film of the Year, vampire gothic flick Sinners, which scored 16 nods, the most in Oscars history.
Not surprised. It's a great movie.
Yes, and among its many nominations is the one for Best Picture, going up against others, including Marty Supreme, which if you want to know more about that movie, hop back to last week. We did a deep dive on it, and also the link to that will be in the show notes, as well as Elordi's Frankenstein, One Battle After Another, and F1. And the 98th Academy Awards will happen on March 15 in Hollywood, baby.
Hollywood.
That'll be the morning of March 16 for us down under.
Yoo-hoo.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I love the Oscars. I think the Oscars and Oscar buzz and how Oscar buzz is generated is such an interesting and fascinating world. Funnily enough, I did deep dive it, I think last year?
Must have been.
It must have been last year. So I'll pop a link to that in the show notes should you wish to listen to that this morning.
Great weekend listen.
A great weekend listen. That is it for our headlines for today. Coming up next is Helen Smith's deep dive into the Beckham family feud and what it says about some larger societal issues. Stick around. That deep dive is coming up for you next.
Hey, it's Helen Smith here. On Tuesday morning, Australian time, we woke up to an explosive statement from Brooklyn Peltz Beckham, reigniting the family feud between the Peltz and the Beckhams. Brooklyn claimed, "I do not want to reconcile with my family. I'm not being controlled. I'm standing up for myself for the first time in my life." But what can we learn from this family breakdown? Is it healthy to break up with family members? And what does it tell us about performative parenting and #boymum culture? Megan Willis is an Associate Professor from Australian Catholic University and a behavioural expert. Megan, Brooklyn's statement that I mentioned there said, "I do not want to reconcile with my family." When is it actually healthy or even necessary to step away from family relationships, and how do people know once they've reached that point?
Yeah, it's really when that relationship is consistently harmful and there's no realistic pathway to change. So when the research that's done interviews with people who are estranged, particularly from their parents, what they describe is kind of long-standing patterns of criticism, manipulation, and boundary violations that often occur in the context of histories of child maltreatment, like physical abuse and emotional abuse. So I guess we can think of estrangement really as an act of self-protection when they've exhausted all possible avenues to repair the relationship. So, I think it's important to recognise that when people become estranged, it's rarely a decision that's made suddenly or lightly. So it often involves this kind of cyclical pattern of distancing and reunification. And ultimately they get to the point where they realise that it will never change. And so when that relationship consistently harms their mental health, when their boundaries are repeatedly ignored, and when they've made repeated attempts to repair the relationship, that is normally the time when people would decide, it's the right time to make that decision to walk away from the relationship.
And why do you think family estrangement is still so taboo?
I think it's all tied up in social norms that dictate that adult children should stay connected to their parents at all costs. So these kind of social narratives about family closeness and obligation really create stigma for those who choose to walk away. So we know from interviews with adult children who are estranged from their parents that they describe kind of receiving a great deal of pressure from family and friends to reconcile. And because they're not supported and they're misunderstood when they make these decisions, it becomes this highly private experience that they're very reluctant to share with people, because I guess the lack of support and the misunderstanding really compounds the isolation that they already feel from having to make the decision to be estranged.
When someone might be essentially breaking up with their family or a family member, is ghosting or no contact one of the best ways to approach it?
I think it's always best to avoid ghosting. So we know with ghosting that there's a lot of negative mental health outcomes associated with it, because it creates this kind of ambiguous loss where people don't necessarily understand the reason that the relationship's ended. So I think in cases where people are wanting to cease a relationship with a family member, the best approach is to communicate what they want to do and why they want to do it briefly, so that they've provided an explanation, that I guess is considerate of the impact it may have on the other party. Often in these cases of estrangement, the issues are that there's a lack of respect of boundaries. And so, it may be that providing that message doesn't lead to someone having acceptance, but at least it doesn't leave the questions about why it's happening that can be really anxiety provoking for people if they have no idea why it's happened.
Now, moving on to Brooklyn, we often hear about mums and their sons and how being a boy mum is different to being a girl mum. Can you unpack what hashtag boy mum culture means?
Yeah, so I think what it kind of refers to is it's this kind of social media narrative that's emerged that explores and I guess sometimes celebrates the relationship between mothers and their sons through, different memes and videos. I guess what's kind of problematic about this hashtag boy mum culture is that while on face value it kind of looks really, lighthearted and fun, some aspects of it can kind of almost romanticize the mother and son bond in ways that blur boundaries. So, for example, memes that describe raising a son as like the longest breakup of your life. And then there are other memes which kind of create girlfriends or wives as rivals or competition for mothers. So it's that element where it kind of normalizes possessiveness and can frame the closeness between a mother and a son in ways that are less about parenting and more about kind of emotional closeness that isn't appropriate for a parent and a child.
Brooklyn claims that his childhood and young adult life has been centered around performative social media posts, family events, and unauthentic relationships. What does performative parenting look like in a world of social media, and how is it different from simply being, a proud mum online or a proud parent posting about your children?
Yeah, I think the crucial difference is proud parenting is really about sharing joy and milestones in ways that, I guess, respect a child's dignity and their privacy, whereas performative parenting is really about the parent's image. So when they're kind of posting in a way of managing impressions and creating an online persona or a particular brand, then the child becomes part of that performance. So performative parenting is less about celebrating a child and it's more about using a child's life to build an adult's public identity or brand.
When we're talking about the Beckhams, they are almost the OG family influencers. The Beckham name, the Beckham's family brand, has become a big part of their relevance that we see today. But now we have everyday people who are massive influencers online who weren't that OG famous, but they have become family influencers with thousands or millions of followers. Are family group influencers, is that also a form of performative parenting?
Yeah, I think it is, because I think if we think about what is the purpose of posting the images, if it's about celebrating the child and, kind of archiving important moments in life, I think we can think of that as proud parenting. But whenever we're posting images as part of a brand or to essentially profit from that, it is performative parenting. And, there's a lot of, I know there's documentaries out there talking about, some of these families where children have kind of grown up as part of a particular brand and they're expected to perform for these posts. So they essentially almost become employees for their parents. And it's not kind of surprising in that context that as they grow up and start to understand what they're being expected to do, that we see that there'll be damage to their relationships with their parents because they're being used essentially to market the brand, and that's not what children need and want from their parents.
Brooklyn has grown up in the public eye with much of his childhood made public by his parents, who even sold his baby pictures and photos of his nursery. Stepping back, though, from this celebrity element, what can everyday Aussies and families learn from this situation when it comes to boundaries and even privacy?
Yeah, I think it's important, I guess, to recognise that, children today will one day be adults. And if you've posted images of them on the internet, you've created a digital footprint that can last indefinitely, and it can leave children becoming adults feeling like they don't have control over the narrative of their life. So I guess for everyday families, I think it's really important to be cautious about sharing information about their children. There's a whole host of safety risks also associated with sharing information about children, but it's also about recognising the importance of their child's privacy. And so, being mindful about what type of images are posted, and when children are of an age where you can get their consent to post images, you should be seeking that consent so they do have a say in how much of their life that they want to make public.
Megan, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thanks for having me.
That was Megan Willis there, an Associate Professor from Australian Catholic University. And that's it for this episode of The Briefing. Before you go, though, we'd love it if you could share this ep with someone else you think might enjoy it as well. It's a really easy way you can support everything we do here at The Briefing. And you can also check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and send us your DMs. Let us know what you're loving and let us know what you want to hear more about on the show. I'm Helen Smith. See you next time.